Borstal Boy 2, a Duologue. David. I knew that folded piece of metal my brother had made was not part of my moped, but my mum truly believed him. She couldn't accept that he'd hit one of those boys for Longmarson with it. It's clear to me that the police did not believe him and were convinced he'd made a homemade knuckle duster and used it as an offensive weapon. I didn't see my brother for a number of months after that, and I was not aware that he'd been sent to a detention centre for his crime. He was only 15. It was many years later I learned he'd got into trouble again. He had assaulted a police officer soon after being discharged from detention. He used to ride his motorbike to the youth club in Tring, as he had just turned 16. It was in the evening outside the youth club. He was recalled to a further 3 months in the detention centre. It was the gossip in the village and the felt sense of humiliation that Mum experienced, and the realisation that her son Michael was now a convicted criminal, that persuaded Mum and Dad to move from our village shop to a new home away from Wilston village. Michael. I was taken from the courthouse in Kidlington Detention Centre, cuffed to a policeman. I hated the police. I remember being taken to a juvenile court in Watford with my cousins when I was 12 years old. They called it a short, sharp shock. Clark 146 was my number. There were other lads there, all with short, cropped hair, scary looking, and they all seemed older than me. I was stripped of my clothes naked, made to shower in cold water, and dress in a battle dress jacket and grey trousers. Yes, sir. No, sir. Marching on the spot. The first thing those boys asked me was, what are you in for? Circuit training, useless work, and scrubbing the floors. I was told in real prison they sewed mailbags. We were not allowed to stand still for one moment. Up at 6, make up the bed pack, then slop out, which was a nasty task. Bang up at 5 p.m, then lights out. We had to march everywhere. I hated it. Yes, not only did I hate the police, now all screws were bastards. I released from my spell in detention centre, I was pleased to go to work and travel on my motorbike wherever I wanted. It was great to be free. I met up with my old school friends at the youth club in Tring. They all knew I'd been inside as reputation sped fast in a small town. The policeman told me I had to move my motorbike, but I didn't want to, as I wanted to keep my eye on it. I knew what thieves were like. He didn't listen to me, and he poked me, and I felt threatened. Like a flashback, I saw red and anger, so I nutted him and drove off into the night on my motorbike. That was my second spell in detention centre. David. We couldn't move to our new house in Aylesbury straight away, as Mum and Dad had bought a new house off the plan, and it was not yet finished. They sold our village shop, so Mum and I went to live at my grandma's house in Watford for a short time, and I went back to my old school, Francis Coombs Secondary Modern School in Garston. I soon met up with my old friend Paul Dorrington, who suffered from asthma, and we went together on the train to London to Tottenham Court Road. This was to visit the second-hand electrical shops in order to buy radio parts. I loved Tottenham Court Road. Not far from Tottenham Court Road was Soho, so Paul and I took a tour. We must have been 40 years old. One of the attractions there was to be an artist and to paint a nude lady, so that's what we did. We paid the entrance fee, and I was given a piece of paper and a pencil and said we could draw a picture of the lady sitting nude in the chair before us. There was no one else there, and the man in attendance asked the nude lady sitting on the chair which of these two lads was the most handsome. So that was my trip to Soho. My interests were really in radio construction and electronics, but I missed riding my moped, so I decided to do something about it. Got up very early one morning, it was still dark, and I crept out of our house without letting Mum or anyone know. I must have walked about 2 miles, and there it was, a 125 BSA Bantam parked at the side of the road. I'd seen it there on my way back from the station. I knew how to hotwire it, and as quick as you like, I was off driving it down the main road with the lights on, to a place where I knew out of the way. I parked it up safely and walked back home and back into bed so Mum and Grandma knew nothing about it. I returned the next day to ride it at will. I knew it was wrong, but that didn't bother me. Our house in Aylesbury was not finished, and so, not to outstay our welcome, Mum and I moved to live with my Aunt Edith in Oldham, and I attended Clarksfield Senior School for a short time. My fame amongst these lads and new school friends in Oldham was that I was from London, and I had been to Soho. Not only that, Mum bought me a set of ice skates, and I learned to skate on the frozen streets in Oldham during the big freeze. It was 1962 or 3, and the Beatles had their first hit record, Love Me Do, and they played at a venue in Oldham that year. Michael. Dad and I lived in lodgings at Aston Clinton, and I had a job with Midwinters. I was a trainee carpenter. I had my motorbike, and I was able to go wherever I wanted, to Watford, to see my cousins, the youth club in Tring, and I ventured out to Aylesbury, the town we were due to move to. I enjoyed my job and was given leave from work to attend Aylesbury College of Further Education, training to be a carpenter. I soon got involved with some of the lads from Aylesbury and the son of the owner of Riley's Mill. This was right next to the college. They had motorbikes, probably none were legal. They also took joyrides at night in the mini pickups belonging to the owner of the mill. In order to get involved, I stole a 150 Francis Barnett motorbike from the college car park and rode it there and stored it in the mill. We took off the mudguards, gave it a paint job to hide its identity. I eventually gave this to my brother as he missed riding his moped. He drove it home along the railway track and across the fields to our house in Finmere Crescent. I knew he appreciated that, and he used to ride it to school across the fields. David. We were able eventually to move to our new house in Aylesbury during the school holidays and be a family again. The roads were not yet finished, with only 1 or 2 houses occupied. The rest were being built, and mud was everywhere, and the builders had to keep the street clean. I missed riding my moped and had to leave it behind in Wilston, so I decided to take the engine out of the frame and bring it back to our new house. With some 4x2 timbers obtained for the building site and a set of 3-wheeler wheels from a tricycle, a petrol tank stolen from a cement mixer, I was able to build a go-kart and ride this around the roads of our estate. It wasn't long before the newspaper reporter took the story from me, as she had been tipped off by the police that I had been seen riding my cart on the roads of our housing estate. The Bucks Herald paper read, David's do-it-yourself cart. An Aylesbury boy was able to return to school after the Easter holidays and proudly tell his friends, I've made a go-kart in the holidays. He's 14 years old. On Sunday of last week, a friend gave David, pictured above, an old moped. As he was unable to ride it, he is too young, he dismantled it. He then made a cart frame from pieces of wood, 4 old wheels, a set of handlebars and a moped engine. Within 3 days it was in working condition, and David estimates it will do 20 miles an hour. Incidentally, David, who's lived in the town for only a month, has very little real interest in engines. His main hobby is in radio construction work, and one of his proudest possessions is a transistor radio which he built that is slightly larger than a matchbox. Michael. At this time I met with the lads from Aylesbury, the mods mainly, and it was the time when Jerry and the Pacemakers had their first hit, I Like It, and things began to swing for us. We got up to all sorts of trouble. When Mum and Dad took the family away for a holiday, I was left home alone. So that's when all the mods from Aylesbury converged on our house for an all-night party. We had to clear up the mess and put the sink back on the wall the next day, as the mess was everywhere. We also got into other trouble, and since none of us could drive a car, we began to joyride. We didn't care whose car we took, provided we could get in it, jump the ignition, and it had petrol. The trouble was the police were hot on the roads in those days, and one time along the Tring Road we had to ditch the stolen car and jump out of the car and run away. David. I always looked up to my brother, as he was always good at what he did. I remember him winning the end-of-the-year boxing championship at school when we were at Watford. He was good at cricket and basketball. He went camping and had a .22 Webley air rifle. I wasn't good at any of these things, but I tried. My interest was in radio construction and amplifiers, as Mum bought me a second-hand Futurama electric guitar and I wanted to learn to play it. One of my friends, Steve Bailey from Tring, taught me to play twist and shout on the guitar, and it wasn't long before I got in with school friends to form a band. It was at that time we were short of band equipment, and I needed a guitar amplifier. I knew what to do and where to get one. It was one Saturday morning, and I walked down the North Orbital Watford Road to the Catholic Church and took my paper bag as though I was delivering papers. No one was around. In I went, and I found the public address amplifier installed on the wall. I dismantled the wires, put the amplifier in my paper bag, and off I went. It was a great amplifier, and I converted it into a guitar amplifier. It was a 15-watt linear concorder amp. I silenced my conscience by reminding myself that the Catholics were wrong anyway. At least that's what I remember my mum saying in my earlier years.